So, yeah, balmy Cardiff, I believe that. Hi, Sam, and anybody else who's out there. Oh, Derek and Jeremy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our, just trying to move this junk as always, live stream event, How to Repair Pendulum Clocks live stream. So, you may remember that we were very broadly working on this American clock, working on it slash kind of actually breaking it more than it already was through our investigations. And investigations are always useful, I think. And I am duty bound to say, or to remind people, because I've said it many times before, is that if you are learning clock repair, and presumably we're all learning, and that's why we're here, is to only ever work on clocks you own, at least until you kind of move across to what might be described as practice. And I say this because the whole time I get myself into all sorts of problems, which are challenges or exciting bits, which hi Jeremy, yeah, no, Ian, sunny, really? Devon? It's not sunny in York. Get myself into all sorts of kind of degrees of difficulty of hot water, warm water, or cold water, or whatever. And of course, if the clock is yours and you bought it, gonna sneeze, excuse me. Then, allergic to clocks, that would be great, wouldn't it? And then it doesn't matter. You do not want to be in the situation like we're here with this American clock, where I've decided to go down a kind of slightly experimental route. And I think it's important that your practice is experimental. You will all know, or most of you will know, if you are familiar with this kind of brand, particularly those people who are supporting us on the Facebook page, which seems to go from strength to strength. I think it's really important that there's no must, should, or ought to, or have to, and therefore that means that you're constantly looking for new ways of doing things. And a little bit's a bit hot. You're always looking for new ways of doing things because that's how we learn. Yeah. You're right, Sam, about the fire. We brought some logs in last week, so it's like, when can we actually light the fire and sit down there and kind of put the brown paper on until spring? Roll on spring. It's only summer's only just finished last week, but anyway, already looking forward to it. I'm just waiting for my blood to thin out a bit. That's all. Although having spent a week in the Bose Museum, where it's like always really cold, all that stone, York just seemed by comparison quite balmy. Anyway, so there we are. So only work on clocks you own, I would say, unless of course you're in professional practice as a clock repairer, then you're probably not watching this video. So we don't have any furniture to burn, so that's you know, we have now, as I say, we've got now. But yeah, the test stands are stacked up by the side of the stove, waiting to keep us snugly and warm. Yeah, so what I did a couple of weeks ago, wasn't here last week, so apologize for that, but there you go, all in the name of horology. What I did last week was, the week before, was to kind of break this clock. But there was a good reason why I decided I would kind of break it. And get my little slightly funny pointy stick. And the reason I decided to break it, well, I didn't decide to break it, obviously, was that I'm not massively familiar with these clocks. And you might therefore ask, well, what the heck are you repairing one for? Well, the answer is, in a way, there isn't a whole lot of point either in just going over stuff that I'm massively familiar with. In this kind of context, anyway, because it's relatively informal and I hope we learn together. So one of this American clock, which was donated to us, made about 1900, is actually in really good condition. I took the springs out and I'll get them. Wearing my gloves. So here are the springs. They're cool, in really nice condition. So they want a bit of a clean, but I got them out of their holders. So they got lots of life in them. So no problem there. So the clock overall, the case was a bit dusty and a few repairs to the bezel and things. But overall, the clock's in really good nick, apart from the fact, and this isn't something that's broken, but apart from the fact that the ratchet wheel and ratchet click the ratchet click rivet is worn. And as you can see here, even when let's just move it around a bit, even when the thing isn't under tension, the ratchet click has moved across, I don't know, a few degrees, 10 or 15 degrees or something. And because the ratchet wheel is quite slim, you can see here, as I said, even when it's not under tension, there's only about half, if that, of the ratchet click on the wheel, which of course is going to lead to failure. And I've again said this as well many times, we're not kind of in the market of anticipating sort of disaster scenario. However, what we don't want is in the reasonable future that mechanism to let go, because if it does, all the stored energy in these badges will be released instantaneously, and that will make the winding key spin round, which could break your fingers, damage your fingers, and also it's going to damage the clock in all likelihood. So of all the things we've seen here in this clock, this is the one area that is of concern. Dachstein mittens are the way forward, and woolly vests. When I was a nipper, as they say up north, I know you like all these northernisms. When I was a nipper, my granny knitted me a green mohair vest. And if you know, like woolly mohair, not like the smart 1960s suits, it's like really prickly, and it was a really kind of strong green color. So I used to wear it like a vest, and it was so prickly, but it was my favorite thing. I never wanted to take it off, and never been parted with my vest ever since. When I was in Bowes last week, we had some visitors from London, primarily in the south, of course, and I'd kind of forgotten to tell them that it's always freezing in that building. And although I had my coat on, I had 5 layers, including my coat. It wasn't like, like this, but it was certainly helps trap the heating. Yeah. Right. Okay. Ian's a purist. He never burns the test stands. He always uses nice seasoned hardwood. So what I did here with this ratchet click was, there's no Team Open Clock Club this week, I'm afraid. They've gotten, what are they doing? I think it's some kind of award presentation night thing or something, but because the academic year started at the university, they're busy, so they send their apologies. You'd think so too. So I thought, well, how are we going to deal with this? So I put a little notice up on Facebook and a couple of suggestions. And so I'm going to try one now, he said, making it up. And that was basically to rivet this little rivet back down again. Now, the problem here is that the wear underneath there, I don't think is going to be taken up. And if it is, it's not going to be taken up for long by riveting. It will tighten it a bit, but the issue is, of course, that the wheel teeth have worn, as the clicks moved across, then the wheel teeth have worn like this, and the clicks worn like that. So even if you rivet it down tightly, they're still going to want to slip out of engagement. So I thought, I know what, genius, stroke of genius, because this wheel or arbor winds clockwise. So this is I think they wind to the center. This must be the striking train, forgot now. And this one's a going train, winds in the opposite direction. If I take the ratchet wheel off and the ratchet click off and swap them left for right, they'll be inside out effectively, and they'll have new surfaces to new bearing surfaces. So I thought, brilliant idea, Reed, do that. So I started whacking at it, which was always a mistake, of course. You know, if it doesn't come apart sort of in a more neat way, and you start hammering, as I'm duty bound to say, barrels down on the bench to get the cap off, then you're just going to break something. And of course, that's what I did. I just kind of mangled the whole thing up. The arbor is soft, it's not hardened at all. So very sort of vulnerable in its way. So not happy about that. But anyway, I beat myself up about it enough. Best, definitely best. Yeah, we don't have butter anymore, I'm afraid. The old vegan daughter has got us converted across to the dark side, so no more butter. Anyway, maybe I'll live a bit longer because of it, or maybe not. So anyway, I kind of got to the point with taking this arbor assembly apart that it was a point of no return. So when I was preparing for this evening, I thought, I know what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to just like get this apart and then deal with the damage or the mess that I've caused, which is kind of fine because it has answered one question, and that is regarding the click, the ratchet wheel, sorry, is that in fact you can't turn it inside out. And the reason you can't turn it inside out is because this is stamped out, this piece of material, and therefore the teeth are already very rounded here on what would be the outside if you turned it inside out. So it's not going to give us any advantage. In fact, it's probably going to make things worse. So there's an option there, obviously, to make a new wheel, but I prefer not to do. By the way, if you, I was on Facebook and somebody asking about making new teeth for a wheel. You can re-rim a wheel, a train wheel, if you've got many, many teeth that are damaged. You can turn the teeth off, make a new wheel, bore out the center and fit the two things together. But of course, that's not massively practical here because of the torque. I would be slightly concerned about putting a new rim, on the hub of this wheel. So you basically make a new wheel, the old one would get inevitably thrown away and stuff like that. So I am going to try and rescue some of the damage that I've caused on this thing, straighten it all up a bit and make a new rivet, because the rivet to me seems to be the kind of weak link. I think if we get this rivet out and it's not massively sort of big at the back, I'm going to center punch it, drill it out, get it off, make a new rivet with a larger head. This material is, let's just have a look. Everything seems to have suffered going on site. That's not that this workshop or workspace is particularly tidy anyway, but when you take things on site, everything gets sort of more wear than it would normally. So this rivet is has a head of 4.3 millimeters and a little rivety bit, we don't know how big it is, of about 2¼ So I'm going to get some of this stock, and because I kind of had a bit of a like, okay, we've gone as far as we can go day to day with this side of practice. So I'm going to take some 1/4" stock, brass, and so that's going to give, what was that? That was 4.3, wasn't it? Yeah, 4.4. So it's going to give us about 1 millimeter either side more, which is a significant improvement, if you like, in the diameter of that rivet. So it's hopefully going to hold the click much flatter. which of course leads us back to one of our insoluble so-called ethical or professional practice questions about improving things. And can't you just do a bit Catholic confession is good for the soul and there? Yeah, I'm not sure about the whole confession thing. I'm afraid I've tried it, and yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Maybe in that sense, it's good, but I think there's also something to be said for just pressing on. Yeah, so I could dress the teeth of this. Yeah, I could cut them back a little bit, that's for sure, which would help. And I might do the same thing with the click. But I said the weak point in this whole arrangement is really, in my view, it's the ratchet click rivet, which you might expect steel and brass together. But of course, these clocks were made to a budget. There was a lot of saving of materials and so on, which is great. That's the part of their joy. But yeah, it brings us back to those kind of couple of questions of improving things. Of course, today, within, as a sort of generalization, we can improve all sorts of things. But that's kind of, at least from my perspective, as a conservator in my other life, not the point, because I'm trying to kind of minimize change, not maximize it, and certainly not if you get to that stage where you're kind of proving how clever you would be. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but what I would say, if you find yourself in a position where you're constantly saying, that's a bad design, I could do that better, make a new clock. That's the answer, and use all that skill and creativity and materials manipulation on a new thing, rather than improving old stuff. Yeah, you could make tap this and put a shoulder screw in hardened and tempered steel, put a bigger brass click on it. In fact, I think, if I have it right, let's just have a look. Yeah, there's a lot of space here on the arbor, so you could fit a thicker ratchet wheel as well. In fact, if the ratchet wheel finally gave way, which it obviously will, and the teeth completely worn out, then there's a good argument for fitting something a bit chunkier, because the whole thing is just held together by this press on brass washer device. Anyway, so I've got some tidying up to do here on this shoulder that's gotten all beaten up, thanks to me. So I'm going to do that first. So yeah, there's improving things. And then there's the big challenge of, one of the big challenges of the kind of right to repair movement, which I'm a massive fan of. And that is repairing things that were never meant to be repaired. And this is probably one of them that way, in terms of maker's intent. You might, oh, hi, Franklin. Is there any limitation on the height? No, Andrew, that's a good point. And maybe what I'm just saying, you could actually replace the rivet, you could replace the click, and you could replace the ratchet wheel with thicker material, which would really help its long-term stability and safeness. But of course, the problem with that is that where do you just say, well, we might as well just make an entirely new clock because we're rebuilding such a lot. And of course, that was one of the underlying kind of discussion points of what I was doing last week about this 18th century automaton. Yeah, we can replace this, we can replace that, we can make new stuff, but where do you and my computer's making a funny noise for some reason, where do you leave off it being one thing and change it to another thing, which of course it's changing anyway, but there's a difference between a kind of passive change and a kind of sort of more active change. I'm just going to tap some of these birds down. Oh, hi, Franklin. Nice to see you. I know some of you supported us last week on our 2 live streams that we ran. If you, we had inevitably some issues with sound on one of them, the first one. So if you want to revisit that, I think it was pretty terrible from the kind of end user's perspective. But if you want to revisit that, though, both those recordings and pictures of inside the automaton are on the Bose Museum YouTube channel. If you want to find the links to that, if you go to my website, there's an events page and you can find them there. Anyway, so thank you, Franklin, and whoever else rocked up to support us last week. It was a good week. So this arbor is very soft, so I'm just tapping down those burrs that I caused a couple of weeks ago when I was rather silly taking the thing apart. So yeah, I mean, I guess, oh, that's better. It doesn't look massively neat, but it's neater. I'm just going to get the watchmaker's lathe and just kind of trim the inside of this now with a graver just to make it flat, because that is against that where the great wheel bears. In fact, what I might do is think about, might be useful to think about putting a washer on there to increase the bearing surface. But again, there's a spacing issue, and then you're into, you know, what are we doing here? Why are we improving things? And so on. So yeah, things that are not meant to be, so-called meant to be repaired, which gets you into the all right, Franklin's back from Germany. Oh well, you're probably pretty near the border. Are you, Franklin, or no? I see that the floods in that part of the world, there's still, well, the floods aren't going on, but the fallout from that is obviously going to take years and years to repair. I saw one of the Nordschleife video car people, you know, they're all still recovering from that sort of terrible flood, which must have been about 3 months ago now. Yeah, so things that are not meant to be, so-called meant to be repaired. So you're into, I suppose, the risky area of conjecture, because I hear a lot, and I tend to push back against it, about it's what the maker intended, blah, blah, blah. And so little of the time do we have any statement about what the maker intended. You know, typically artists, and I don't, controversial point, but it's not really, I don't consider this art, but, you know, who am I to say? Artists often do work within a kind of stated manifesto, if you like. And this clock was made for retail, obviously, in relatively large numbers. So I suppose there is a manifesto there in terms of what that industry or business was aiming to achieve. However, that all changes, and it changes on change, step changes, the First World War, the advent of mains electricity, the 6 pip signal, the radio signals, you name it, has kind of happened since this clock was made. So the original context is a thing on the breeze, really, and we can use that to say we conjecture this and conjecture that. For me personally, sorry, not sneezing. For me personally, good luck. For me personally, I would prefer to focus on the here and now. The problem with the here and now is that is the most difficult place to be, in my humble opinion. I'm actually trying to find the watchmaker's lathe. It can't be far. Here it is. So the one of the great joys of sort of conjecture is it's relatively easy. Obviously, if you're an historian, then that's kind of part of your job. I do hear conjecture being used a lot, though, to say, it's, as I said before, it's what the maker intended, etc., which I kind of don't believe. So we can squeeze that in to the shot just about sneaked in there just so you can see what's going on. Right, now I need to find a collet. Oh, Franklin's 130 kilometers. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Jeremy. I mean, the reality is that as the context changes, things change. We used to have a similar, I've never really been a repairer of anything, believe it or not, but don't tell anybody. But a watch repairer. And we used to sell Seiko watches in their shop, which is still on the go. Gosh, rusty here, must be flux by the look of it. Tut, tut, tut. And these Seiko automatic watches are absolutely brilliant. What you call, I think they call them Seiko 5. Really good for the money, value for money, and reliable and so on. But the problem was, as Jeremy pointed out, or points out about this clock, is that essentially those watches never got serviced. You would sell one and then for, I don't know what they were, 30, 40, 50 quid. And the person took it away for 20 years. They said, this watch is incredible. It's, it's like, reliable, keeps good time. It's water resistant. It's got luminous hands, blah, 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 all good stuff. And then they bring it back up to 20 years, often when they've kind of got a bit more affluent and well into their career, and they want to treat the watch by spending some money on it, having it serviced. And it's kind of never the same again because everything's been held together with bits of old dried oil and so on. You take it apart, put it through the watch cleaning machine, and it's kind of never the same again. And that's probably the thing with this clock, whether or not the manufacturer in that kind of modern sense ever thought about service life like you would today. And you'd say with a washing machine, basically that once it gets to 5 years old, one day after that, it breaks down, you repair something else breaks and so on, which hopefully is, hopefully it's changing. So who knows if that ever happened. Probably this was more cost-driven, undercutting other markets. I imagine the German makers and English makers, of course, which wasn't that difficult with their fusee-driven clocks. But anyway, and then there's a future thing. It's, again, the kind of a slippery animal that is the future. I mean, who knows if reality is even real? Probably not is the answer. So they're, for me, easy places to be. We're doing this for the future. And in fact, Sam and maybe others will know of the work of Jane Henderson at Cardiff University, and really great work and some quite challenging proposals about the heritage world, which is kind of where I slightly casually engage with now and again. And there's a bit of a pushback, which I'm really heartened to hear by Jane Henderson and others about this thing for the future. Because again, it's sort of, I'm not paraphrasing her, but it's a kind of a bit of a cop-out, really. The difficulty is in the here and now, because inevitably we rub up against existential questions. If we start talking about this stuff, what it is, what it means, we ultimately get round to what we are and what we mean. And of course, those questions are really, really difficult. As I don't have the in-house philosophical, ontological, epistemological expert in the room tonight, that's probably about as far as I'm going to get. I should go back to clock repair. So I'm just going to tidy up this scruffy mess that I've made here, or at least the bearing surface of it. Just cut it a little bit with the graver. And again, I think finally I've been threatening for months, if not years now, about this whole thing about the lathe. It's a very philosophical week. I think, isn't that, Sam? You wouldn't know, of course, being a young slip of a lad, but just one of the of getting older is that the actual kind of nuts and bolts of life become less important, and or they seem less important, and the kind of philosophical side of things seems much more sort of relevant. I don't know. Right. Obviously, I don't want to put away too much material there because the thing was perfectly happy, happy using the term very loosely before I came along and started to break it. Anyway, we'll need the lathe again in a minute because we're going to make that rivet. Probably take ages on this. So yeah, workshop. We talk in our book. And again, I always say thank you to those people who bought the book and noticed, because I've been doing other things, looked on Amazon today, and those books have been trickling out quite nicely. Thank you very much. Not massive numbers, but heartening. And I was working on a book today with my co-author, John. So that was also cool and nice to catch up with him. He's busy man. Everybody who repairs clocks seems to be getting super busy after lockdown. So what I'm going to do now, having tidied up that rivet, is just actually flatten this area a little bit as well, because that got a bit knocked about. So let's just find a stake. Got a couple of little silversmithing stakes here, which are nice. This one is like a mushroom top on it, which is incredibly useful. If you're ever rebushing barrels and you need to rivet in the new plug before you mount the barrel in the boxwood chuck and bore it out again, this is incredibly useful because it just about fits inside a French clock barrel. And this one is flat on top. So can't remember where I picked those up from, but somewhere along the way. So let's just see whether this will fit in there without causing more grief. Little White House watchmaker's hammer, which is quite nice. Push those sort of burrs down a little bit. Maybe we can do a bit more. So thanks everybody who contributed to the, I don't want to spread this material too much, of course. Right, okay, yeah, getting your socks on. Socks are just a major problem. I mean, find out how that works. I think the answer is to have enough money, isn't it, to only wear them once, when you once the whole time. I don't know. I'm not sure I would do that though, even if I had the money. Or as Sam says, just get some kind of pet that eats them. Maybe get a pet that eats the clocks. That's even better. I'm sure there is such a thing out there. Then you don't have to worry too much about repairing them. a lot of hammering here, but they're kind of light taps, but it has spread those little bobbly bits back in. So no doubt that doesn't fit on the arbor anymore, but that's okay. I'll just very gently broach it. But you can see the problem with all this stuff is that you just go from one alteration or change to another, and it becomes a kind of chain reaction, which again, we talked about a lot last week with sort of so-called complex objects. It's really impossible to isolate. And I guess any of you who've worked in industry, for instance, you get this in complex sort of chemical plants or power stations and things. You change something across there and it has a knock-on effect. And particularly when things are getting worn and all getting to the end of their kind of service life, you change something and improve it, make it really strong, and it just moves the problem elsewhere. Anyhow, brooches without handles, really terrible. Should have a file handle on there. I could run off and get my gas torch, but I won't because it'll take too long. Put it in the vise. Everybody knows that those dogs are mad, Sam. Even I know them, and I don't go near them. I think John's got one. My co-author, something like that anyway. Which he loves to bits, of course. So brooch sticking up in the air from the vise. That's going to go wrong. We've also got burrs on the arbor as well. So let's just get pivot file. One of the few times I'll use a pivot file. I was talking to, obviously, to a Team Open Clock Club the other day about what happens when inevitably don't come back for these events. Necessarily this or Open Clock Club, and we were deciding, you know, if I'm stuck in traffic or just go crazy and never come back. And we felt that the answer was, at least for 1 week, that what would happen was that Team Open Clock Club will go through the drawers of tools one by one and just basically take them out and hold them up to the camera, and you can all talk about them. And then she'd also have an incredibly generous tool giveaway session, which we haven't had for a couple of weeks now, a few weeks. So yeah, you can see the burrs around that hole where the pin's been shoved through. So just partly push those down with the burnishing end of the pivot file is quite useful. Quite a lot of pressure on there without bending the arbor. Still needs opening up a little bit. I've tapped it down. Right, so kind of back to square one. At least it's reasonably flat now for the time being. So I think the next thing to do is to get this rivet out. So I'm going to try riveting one train, and replacing the rivet on the other train, and see which is most successful, or which is deemed to be most successful. I would say already that taking this assembly apart is maybe something I wouldn't take it apart again, but I might take the click out, but the rivet out, and let's see how that works. So on this side, I think one of the suggestions from Facebook, let's just unhook the click, the spring. I think one of the suggestions from Facebook was that you can put some shim stock underneath and rivet it down, which is not a bad idea because it'll prevent it from getting squashed right down. But there actually isn't a whole lot of room under there. So in fact, there isn't even really any room for the spring. So I'm just going to try just riveting it from the back. Again, I'll bring my stick into yeah, we thought it was a really good thing that would just get the draw. So we've got a plan B if for any reason I'm not here in the next few weeks. And that is just looking at all the tools, which should be good fun actually. Maybe we should do that anyway. Yeah, Potty, it's gonna quite some of the sticks I love the most. Yeah, the silversmithing sticks are really nice. Yeah, but maybe we'll do that. We'll have a if we don't get through all the faults, we'll have an Open Clock Club special. Maybe we need to have a Christmas special, I think, of a quiz. We had a quiz last year, didn't we? We'll have a Christmas quiz. So I'm just going to rivet this one. Obviously, I don't want to rivet it tight. And let's just see how successful that is. You can see it's quite wobbly now. I got a feeling that any amount of riveting is just going to spread the rivet inside the click and it's going to prevent it from working. But let's just have a look. Got the spring out of the way and nice little polished hammer. The problem with this is I've just got a feeling that it'll immediately just get wobbly again. Yeah, it's the rivet in the hole that's wobbly. Doing this before I do the other one, partly because doing the other one's quite a good job, but also I'll kind of have a sense of how successful this is. Let's just see if it still works. It's still working and it's definitely tightened up quite nicely for now. But of course, the question is, how long is that going to last before it works loose again? I'm just going to get a slightly more rounded hammer so I can rivet round the rivet, because what I don't want to do is just rivet down on the top so it squidges out. I actually want to kind of close it round. So yeah, got the little ball peen hammer here, and I'm just going to tap around, making sure the rivet head is in good contact with the stick. You could obviously use actually a hemispherical punch. I could look in the watch staking set and see if there's a punch, a bit like you would for not that I've ever done it, but sort of riveting a domed head rivet, and that way to kind of clamp it down a bit. I mean, the answer is that you've got a relatively tiny bit of material, as we said a few weeks ago, and an enormous torque on there. Still loose, and let's just have a look. Still working, so we're going in the right direction, but it's actually tightening down better than I thought it would. Look, I've given it quite a lot of play there with the tweezers, and it's actually quite good. So maybe this is the way forward after all, and I've just wasted my time. However, I would, in my weak defense, I would say that the other one is an interesting experiment, and at least I can tell the world. This is an interesting point about these sessions and doing YouTube videos. I noticed the other day that the video that I made on the watch, the Verge pocket watch thing, and that, I don't know, it was maybe 6 months ago. I've done nothing to promote it. It just sits there. It's one video on the channel and it's got like 10,000 views. So in terms of spreading the word, that is incredibly useful. Of course, what the videos, individual videos, don't do in the same way that these sessions and the Open Clock Club does is it doesn't sort of quite build the same community. So there's a lot to think about in that respect. As we've said many times, the you mean just kind of file it here? Could do, but it's not doing anything there. I think the spring maybe rubs on it a bit, and I want to retain as much material as possible for strength. So if if that's what you mean, Derek, but certainly in this side, I could rivet from this side, but it's not the rivet in relation to the click that's the problem. It's the rivet in relation to the wheel that is wobbly. Yeah, it's tightened down really well. I am surprised. So maybe that is all you need to do. And I could have just said, just rivet it down. That would have taken 3 minutes, 3 seconds, in fact, and not 3 weeks. But anyway, so kind of quite happy with that. Making me think, do I actually need to take the other one off? Well, the answer, of course, is no. Don't actually need to do any of this. Could just watch the telly. Right, so it's got to the stage now where it's too tight. So we know that that's too far, which that's all right. I think it'll easily free up again. Obviously, you don't want it hanging up, but I think with a bit of manipulation, it'll soon free up. Find the right wires, and they are not it. Maybe it's just terminally tight now. Gone from one problem to another. Oh well, I now know where the kind of limit was of that thing. What do they say? Great is the enemy of good. So that just wants to go on a stake with a hole in it and push it through a little bit to free it up. Just see if I can find one. Big enough. Not I did have another one somewhere. It's too big. This is a draw plate, jeweler's draw plate, so it's not the right tool for the job, but it might do it. Yeah, that's going to help us. But I'd rather be in this situation where it's ever so fractionally tight and just needs opening up. Just make sure that's not going to make it worse. Then the other way around, and it be on the this side. That's better. Nearly loose enough now. A little bit too much faffing about, I think, but when has that ever stopped us before? It's not quite clicky enough. Maybe it needs a bit of oil on it as well. Obviously, what you don't want that to do is to hang up. Not good. There we go. Sorry, can't see. So I think in terms of riveting or tightening up the rivet, no, hammer the head. Why not dress the head as well? No, hammer the head. Oh, hammer the head. Yeah, because I could do, and I suppose in a way you are by having that stake underneath. It's just that the sloppiness was not on this side. The sloppiness was here. It was the rivet moving in the hole. So I kind of wanted to attend to that side primarily. Okay, so there we go. Riveting, carefully riveting, actually has been surprisingly successful. It still does wobble a bit, but and obviously you can't just keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that. But it takes a minute, and it is probably going to be okay. But again, it asks that question, or begs that question about get this one out now. So I'll do this one just as an experiment and see if it's any better. Might actually end up being worse than the other one, but we're in for a penny, in for a pound. Yeah, of how far ahead you try and anticipate with your repair. As you know, and can understand now, I never offer any written guarantee with any of my work, and for obvious reasons. That would be totally crazy, but I do go back to work when it's not right. I had the situation, even though I bang on about the taper pin in the hand and a long case clock, make sure it's draw filed and really, really tight. I had one drop out funny last week and had to go back to a repair. It's like, how many times? Don't listen to my own lessons. Eyeglass. So how far ahead do you kind of try and anticipate? Good question. Again, it comes back to that remaking and improving kind of thing, doesn't it? I see some repairers give years and years guarantee. I just think, I suppose it's a bit like an insurance, isn't it? It's not actually a guarantee on the work, or anyway, who knows? I can't even begin to think about that. But with any clock, most of them we repair are at least kind of 50, 60, 70 years old. Many are 100 years old, that's 120 years old, and many are 200, 300, 400 years old. So I don't get the whole guarantee thing, but obviously you have to guarantee your sort of professional service, hence all the need for insurance and that kind of thing. So I guess there's no right or wrong answer, because you're always going to be slightly on the wrong side, a bit like riveting that click. You're either going to say, well, I think I came across this this week, again, yesterday, in fact, looking at some reports of a lantern clock rope, which is not expensive and it's not massively difficult to replace it. So, and it could be classed as a consumable. So you say, well, I'll replace that. But clock lines, you know, they're maybe getting a bit frayed. Yeah, I would probably replace them. Same for lantern clock rope. But other things, you look like these clicks and so on, where you've got the potential for not only damage to property, but personal injury, then you could be hyper cautious. And again, I think a bit like, again, getting older, I don't know about everybody else out there, but I get more cautious, and I'm not a massively cautious person, but certainly building more time to do things without rushing and so on and so forth. So that's all obviously context and experience led. So for the record, I don't think this needs doing, but we'll do it anyway because so-called educational or sharing value. Probably heard then actually that the not surprisingly, the brass from the rivet is really hard. And we don't know how long this clock's run for. It appears to have run for years and years and years. But as I said, just checking that the punch mark is in the middle of the rivet or thereabouts. So I'll just drill that out if I can find a drill bit, which will be easier said than done. To kind of answer my own rambling question, I'd say something like, well, I don't know. If you consider, I think I mentioned this before, but involved with institutions now, some of those institutions are saying you need to keep your insurance in place for 5 years after the work. So there's your answer. From a professional indemnity and public liability perspective, you are responsible for 5 years. So in terms of the invoicing, the rate or whatever, you obviously need to build that in. The minute your whatever guarantee you put on a thing runs out is kind of meaningless, really, because the lawyers for these institutions are not going to be interested in that if something goes wrong. So that's kind of quite cool, really. I would putting my thumb in the air, say about 18 months. You know, if something fails and it's 18 months after you've worked on that object, then I would say it's reasonable that it's no longer your responsibility. However, of course, it really depends what it is. There's a world of difference between a weight falling off a long case clock and maybe making a bit of a noise when it clangs on the floorboards, and a turret clock dial falling off the side of the building, which and really and killing somebody, for instance, in some kind of worst case scenario. Hence, never work on turret clocks. Leave them to Keith Scobie-Youngs, who's a brave man. It'd be interesting, actually. I'm going to ask him about that, because I've got a slightly bigger clock that's a turret clock. Somebody's asked me to look at it, and it's not actually in a turret situation, it's at ground level. So I'm thinking, shall I, shan't I? So I'm going to ask Keith what he thinks about that. Saving electricity, yeah. Weetabix powered drill. Let's get some tape. Drills reasonably centered on the work. Obviously, heck of a lot easier if you've got your drill press and it's all set up and you can clank it and you can look at it and it's at eye level. Again, the joys of live stream. Maybe when we come back, we'll have, I'll actually go for that. I noticed in the, there's a camera shop here in York that I've been shopping at on and off for about 30 years now. I noticed they've got a secondhand one of these, or similar camera to one I've bought. It would be really great to go around fantasy world, to go around the studio and have drill press cam and lathe cam. I guess some live streamers have that. I don't really watch that many. There's a Dutch guy, I've forgotten what his name is now, but sometimes I come across him. He does watch bushing wire, perhaps it has to pivot the click. Bushing wire, perhaps as it has to pivot. Bushing wire to replace the pivot, the click, the rivet, sorry, even. Oh, reminds me about Jeremy's mentioned bushing wire, and I've been thinking about Derek's Jacko runner thing. And again, I wonder whether you could use bushing wire for that in somehow to get I hadn't really thought it through. But I did notice in my draw of collets, I've used bushing wire to, thank you, Jeremy, for reminding me, to make up some little runners. they go in the tailstock. It's not the drum that you can rotate, and you've got all the pivot sizes on there, but I just hold them in the tailstock for their pivots on the occasion that I do pivot polishing, and file through. I'll find one if I can. So here's one made out of wood, bit of pegwood or boxwood that I use. That goes in the, lost the lathe now, tailstock of the lathe. And I saw one in here earlier. Oh yeah, there you go. Here's one. I didn't get to focus. That's made out of a bit of brass rod, not bushing wire actually. You can see I've drilled in a little bit, then filed away half just to support the pivot if you're going to do any pivot polishing or anything. But bushing wire would be really good for that because it's obviously already got the hole in it. And as I said, bitterly complained before with bushing wire is that for the small sizes, you always end up, if you buy one of these sets, with lots and lots and lots of this watch stuff, which I never use or very, very rarely use. So anyway, I've got plenty small size bushing wire. Derek, if you want a couple of lengths to have an experiment with making your pivot polishing attachment thing. Right, how are we getting on here? I think we're about done. Let's just get it off. Does it come loose? Yeah, it has. Right, well, that is not going to make a recovery. But what we can do now, let's just wiggle that off. Come on. Not that it's something that massively motivates me, but I did wonder whether, I've probably mentioned this before, the institutions that some people belong to. I belong to ICON, as I probably mentioned 1,000 times, and we have run some dynamic object as kind of live sessions in lockdown, and we're going to do another one in December, all being well. But whether any of the clock type institutions, I know the HS do their excellent lecture series, but the others were doing more like this, more kind of practical, free to attend sessions as a kind of social thing. Be cool if they were. I've not seen any, but I've also not been looking. So, right, let's have a look at this click. So it's quite cool, actually, exercise, just seeing this off the wheel, if nothing else. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of worth it just getting the thing off, because what I hadn't realized is that if it'll focus, yeah, is that the top of the click is actually turned away. So there's a kind of recess into which that head fits. I presumed it was just flat there, and that probably does help a bit with stability. On the back, it is just flat. But what's happened is that the wear has caused, you can just see it there, maybe the click to kind of squidge out and kick out. So I'm going to tap that down on my steel block, and then we can measure the bore there. Let's just have a look at the rivet. Cool, cool, cool. So as much as the back of the click, let's just get my thing, whatever it's called, clipboard. Chaos on the clipboard. So I don't quite know what the advantage of this from a manufacturing perspective is. zoom out a wee bit. There we go. So the click is actually a bit like an oil sink, shaped like that ish. And the rivet is flat, which is a little bit sort of counterintuitive. Something like that. So I might actually make the new rivet to match the click underneath. But the important thing is, in terms of stability, is that the new rivet's going to be significantly wider than the old one. Maybe it's actually a good idea to have a space underneath, and it can't possibly kind of get hooked up and rock from side to side. Let's just put a wheel in here as well. Finish my drawing. Cool. Okay, so that's quite interesting to see that. Not that they're all the same by any means, but having never taken one apart before, it's always nice. So I'm just going to measure the bore of this, the click here with, I can find my M2. Let's just see what this is, or was. It's about 2 mil. Presumably this clock is imperial. I'm pretty sure it's imperial. Now this would be actually one of those, I keep meaning to buy a set, but never seem to quite have the money for it to buy a set of drill blanks, because it would be really useful for measuring stuff like this. Right, okay. Well, there you go. So the that's 2.5, and that doesn't fit. And 2.3 does fit. So we know that our pivot, new rivet thing wants to be about 2.4 mil, which is interesting because the old one is about 2 mil. So immediately that's going to give the whole assembly more stability. So we can put that to one side, but bearing in mind what I said before about improving things. Let's just tap down. And in fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to also tap down these winding squares, because I don't think they were particularly square when they were brand new, but the clock's been wound with a very loose fitting key. And you can see, because the arbor's very, oh, hi, Jonas. Nice to see you. I like the, I'm waiting for developments on the cat clock screw thing that you mentioned on Facebook. Thought that was a really good idea. Anyway, joke. Yeah, I think it is. It's basically when you're fitting two components together, you actually want to cut material away from one of those components because it gives it much more stability. I think it's a nice idea that they fit together like this, but they never actually do. So it's much better just to have it touching essentially on the edge. So I think you're right. That's why it's designed like that, with that little divot thing, a little cutaway. So too many hammers. And my pegwood. Like my finger, and let's just tap that down, bearing in mind, of course, that it might actually be cracked. So we want to have a good old look at it. Yeah, I think as Derek said before, it's an idea just to dress the end of that click, just to tidy it up a bit, because it's in a bit of a state. That's the usual thing, bearing in mind that removing material can't be undone. So we want a rivet that's about 2.5 millimeters on the shank bit, and it just happens that somewhere here, and I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up. We've got some brass that's 1/4 inch. There it is. Look, just happen to have a 1/4 inch collet and a 1/4 inch bit of brass. So let's find our collet. Definitely need to tidy up. Get rid of John's vice. I want many of his vices. And come on. Looking around for things. So here's our 1/4 inch diameter collet with a watchmaker's lathe. Again, this job would be a quadrillion times easier if we had a bigger lathe. But anyway, I don't just at the moment, but I can feel one heading my way. Kind of. So, and just saw that off. Yeah, I think the hole in the wheel is more representative diameter than the rivet, not the hole in the plate. It's already worn already. It's a good point, Franklin, actually. Good point. Gosh, it's a good job all you people are here, because I'd be all over the place. So yeah, this hole is also useful, or very useful to measure, in fact. So let's just have a little look. Drill again. So with the 2.5. And the 2.3. Yeah, so it's between 2.2 and 2.3. So you're absolutely right, Franklin. The hole in the rivet is bigger, either because it's worn or because it was just bigger. Presumably, it has to be bigger, otherwise the thing wouldn't pivot, of course. But that's quite an interesting point of whether they want to be pretty close in size. Otherwise, it's just going to be incredibly sort of wobbly. But very good point. Thank you for that. So we've got our rough looking bit of metal here. I'll actually just file that round because it's rough as anything. And then rather painfully can start turning it with the graver. Which of course, if we actually had a decent lathe, it'd be done in about 4 seconds. But anyway, not to worry, all good exercise. Character building stuff, as my granny used to say. Let's get that little lathe back, move some stuff. Not to lose too many parts along the way. What's that? There to my monitor. Zoom out. See to the collet's clean-ish. Then the usual thing, try and find a graver that's moderately sharp. Should really go downstairs and find my ceramics done, but I'm not going to do because it'll take me too long. in the state of affairs. I do know. Right. Okay. So, drink. And let's just start turning this down. This might take about a week to do it. So. Rest up a bit. When you turn in with the graver, I always not always do anything but turn with the oblique side up like that. So let's just zoom in a little bit. With the oblique side up, as opposed to like a tool, tool in a lathe, where you'd have the tool like that, have it like that, gives you much more control because the tool is better supported. And unlike a tool set up in a lathe, cross slide, turn above the center. So you're actually turning at about 45 degrees to the axis of the work, whereas with a lathe in the cross slide, you'd obviously have the tool at center height. Stops it from diving underneath the work. So maybe if I just look for my glasses, I can do this without the eyeglass, which would be a bit easier for everybody. So let's just get it centered up. Clamp the lathe down a bit. Normally I have it so the little feet are just hanging over the side of the bench, which works really well, but can't do that and get it in the shot. So when it starts to judder like that, then just move the angle a little bit. That's again one of the many joys of turning on the T-rest, that you can just constantly change the angle of the graver, which makes life well, it doesn't make life easy, but it is one of the beauties of working like this. Of course, you wouldn't normally turn down a bit of material that's this big using this method, but anyway. Shows that it's possible, I suppose. Sound effects. Now, because I'm getting smaller diameter, my center height is actually too high. I'm having to try and reach over the top. So I'll just lower the T-rest a little bit. That's better. And then, as always with these things, in order to make sure it's a decent fit, I'm going to turn that cone on the front of the work just to keep offering the wheel up, rather than stopping, picking up the thing to measure it. So just, you kind of lose the scale of it. So it's just easy to offer up the wheel, which is again why the tip over tool rest is so useful in this case. So we know we've still got quite a way to go. We're getting there. Of course, if you're not in a massive rush, this is quite meditative work. It's just tidy at the end. It's looking scruffy. There we go. I'll put another bevel on it. And offer up again just to see where we are. Right, okay, getting there. Quite long enough. So again, relating to what Jonas said, I want the rivet to be very slightly undercut. We've already got that sort of scalloped away bit at the click, so it doesn't have to be massively undercut, but I don't want any kind of shoulder, internal kind of shoulder there that's going to cause us a problem. Right, here I've got that. Can't read this computer now with my glasses on. Just have a look. Right, starting to sit in the hole now. So we're getting there. This is obviously, I should have said before, but it's quite grubby, the whole face of that thing. So obviously before we fit our new rivet, we want to clean all that gunge away. Otherwise, we're just going to be, and again, because we've gone down in diameter, the T-rest height just needs lowering a little bit. Get into the corner. This graver, by the way, is really cool for, if you can see it there, it's probably out of focus, but it's lozenge shaped, really good for this kind of work, quite big. I think it's about 4 millimeters across flats, but it's not square. It's look around like that, you can see, there we go, focus. You can see it's lozenge shaped, which is really cool for, again, digging into corners. I think somebody on Facebook was talking about turning pillars and whether you grind up the lathe tool to do a form tool, which I would say no, although I think a lot of people said yes, but no, that's cool. I would just always rough out with your lathe tool on the slide rest. And if you're making knopped pillars and shaped pillars, for instance, then just finish it with a graver like this, because it's actually how you get that kind of organic shape, I suppose. So must be it's moving about a bit. Must be getting there now. Yay. Right, okay. Cool. So there we are. In the ballpark for sure. I think it needs to be a bit longer. Where's my clicky click gone? Put that on there. That way around, and the wheel on there as well. That thing got away. Yeah, all right, it's not quite long enough. Needs to be about 3/4 of a mil longer. But at least I know now I'm kind of in the ballpark on diameter because it fits on. So I can just make the next bit, can more quickly go down to diameter, or at least I could if I wasn't doing it in this slightly antiquated way. And it's easy to think that it takes ages like this, but actually, as you saw there, turning down that extra kind of 3/4 of a millimeter or something took what, a minute or something like that. I don't know. Depends how much of a rush you're in, I guess. Right. Should be, I think there's enough sticking through to rivet. Yeah, something like that. So I'm going to saw through this with a piercing saw, but in order to make sure that my piercing saw goes something like straight, I'm just going to nick it first with the graver. And again, if I could be bothered to look for one, and I should, rather than being lazy, look for somewhere in here is, that's what after that one. It's even remotely sharp, a little bit rusty, but it's just a much finer kind of lozenge shaped one. So again, I'll just make a little groove and cut in. And I don't know if it was a set, but we can obviously make this a bit bigger, a bit thicker, a bit heavier than it was before. So I'll just cut in until the graver runs out of steam. It's surprisingly a long way, actually. And then if my piercing saw's got a blade in it that's even remotely sharp, which it hasn't. I use my finger, you can't see that, use my finger in the top of the frame. So when it cuts through, the blade doesn't clash down onto the bed of the lathe. And you can see probably on the lathe bed, many people have done that over the years. I think I need to. Actually cut a sharper blade in. Yeah, let's do that. What the heck? It's nearly Christmas. It's a new Christmas blade. Getting through them. I haven't bought any in years. I think I'd said many times before, I just ended up with some really motley selection. So once I get down to having none and got them all used up, I'm going to actually buy some and sort of keep them graded. So I can answer that important question of what size piercing saw blade do you use? Try to let the thing fly off between the floorboards when it cuts through. There we go. There's our little proto rivet. I could do to find a collet now and either file it flat. I might actually just put it in the vise and file the majority of material off that, because no doubt I will be royally attacked for filing in the watchmaker's lathe by, again, no names. Whatever happens when this event happens where team Outer Pendulum Clocks takes over and goes through all the tolls and starts giving them away, don't get a watchmaker's lathe because it's completely wrecked. But it's okay for that kind of rough work, but not good for the sort of fine work that you people will be used to. Right, okay. Wrong glasses for finding things though. So I'll just gently hold this in place, squidging it too much, and I'll need cleaning. So yeah, I'm going to leave it a bit chunkier. Why not? And also it's a good diameter. I think we've got, oh no, I haven't got any time, running over time. But let's just offer it up and see what it looks like. Okay. Yeah, so let's pop that on there. Pop that on there. Well, it's going to look a bit crazy, but it's going to give the click a lot more support. And so having made that decision to drill it out and like, oh, well, that's the end of that then, which probably wasn't the right decision, having seen how successful the other one was. At least this, yeah, is going to, obviously I'm going to put this back in the lathe and tidy up the top so it's nice and flat. And then next week, rivet it in place. Maybe I'll make another one that's a little bit tighter here, but you can see there's just enough sticking through there to rivet it, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, kind of looks a bit crazy, but I suppose given that we were making a new one anyway, then at least it's going to give it a bit more support for longer. Who knows? Anyway, as always, no must, should, have to, or ought to, but just a kind of discussion. Oops, let's move them so you can see them. A discussion about the thinking about the repairs. It's the thinking that's important. Obviously, we build up these skills as we go along, but actually, the more we kind of advance into practice, it's more about the thinking rather than the skills to do those two things go in balance, if you know what I mean. So anyway, all right, yeah, Jeremy talks about the Institute running an event like this. It would be really cool if they not took over this, obviously, because this is a sort of independent brand initiative. But yeah, I'm slightly, well, I'm not surprised, but it would be really good if there were some of the, be interesting to see if whether any of them, Franklin, on the continent, you may not have a chance to answer this week, but are the institutions doing anything in terms of the kind of social side of clock practice, like this kind of informal stuff? Be good if they did. But anyway, who am I to say? Thank you so much for joining me this week. We will progress next week. I'm working on contract, but it's locally, so I'll dash back and we'll get this riveted on, and then we'll offer them up side by side and kind of decide whether it was worth it and that kind of thing. And then I think that's it. We can start putting the clock back together again once it's washed. So thanks very much for joining us again. Please, if you're on Facebook during the week, we'd love to see you there. You know who you are, the people that contribute to that, really appreciated. I looked today how many members are active in relation to the total number of members. And for our group, it's incredibly high, which is like really reassuring. Anyway, what else is happening? Saturday, again, I'm away, but back for Open Clock Club, where we're going through our list of common faults, maybe actually getting to the top of the list if we're lucky. So anyway, if not, then we'll see you this time next week. So thanks very much and bye for now. Thank you.